This episode of the Sara Carter Podcast is brought to you by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Join the Tunnel to Towers Foundation on their mission to do good 20 years after 9/11. Donate $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org.
Hey, let's jump right into this. I've got retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Gade on the show today with us. I mean, look, this is a man who's going to present a whole different side of the argument on wounded veterans and wounding veterans. That's the name of his book. He's the author of Wounding Veterans, How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer. And I would argue, the rise in suicides, hopelessness, drug addiction, there is something to be said for the argument that Daniel Gade is making. We're going to go into a deep conversation with him about, how just giving handouts and not helping veterans raise themselves up. You know what I'm talking about, especially for you, those of you out there who have a wounded family member or a wounded veteran like I do in your household. That's not who they really are. I mean, that's what happened to them, but that's not who they are. And there's so much more. And they're exactly the same person in a lot of ways, sometimes better than they were before they were wounded, because they've learned to live with adversity. We're going to be talking about that and what we can do to help them and help ourselves and help our nation heal, right? We've got Daniel Gade. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about what happened to my friend James O'Keefe. I bet you a lot of you were really horrified, or you should have been, by the FBI's raid into James O'Keefe. He's the head of Project Veritas, kind of the guerrilla journalism, gotcha journalism that has made him so famous, and the FBI raiding his home. We're going to talk about that as well. I think it's very important that we kind of analyze that a little bit, because our country is changing in fundamental ways. This administration, we saw this under the Obama administration, expanding its powers to spy on its own people is probably one of the most dangerous things that a government can do, because it will shift our government from a republic and a democracy into something quite different. I'm also reporting to you from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I was here last night with Sean Hannity. I am here for the rest of the week, and I've got a little bit of a cold. So if my voice sounds different, I apologize for that. I do not have the vid. I was tested, in case anybody out there is wondering. But I do have a sore throat and a little bit of a cold, and I'm just pushing right through it. I'm not going to let it get me down until it gets me down, right? Remember, go to SaraACarter.com, my new website. It looks fabulous. That's SaraACarter.com. We've got some great writers there now. We're updating all the stories consistently throughout the hour. We're definitely going to have stories on these podcasts with links to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, right? So whether that's Spotify, iHeart, Apple, go to my website, SaraACarter.com. You'll get the links there. You'll also get the links to all my social media. And while you are there, please sign up for our email list so you don't get shadow banned. You know what I'm talking about. We are seeing this across the board, both in social media and, by the way, on the mainstream media national news channels where they are not telling the truth. We've seen this in the story with Kyle Rittenhouse and what's happening here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We want to get the truth out to you. We want you to have that truth. It's just that important. Now is a critical time to be vigilant in the defense of our freedom. There is no better way to do so, folks, than by joining the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC. AMAC believes in fighting the good fight against reckless government spending and the ever-expanding scope of the federal government. I mean, I really love this organization. This is important. If you want an organization that will support what you believe in, you will go to AMAC. They believe in securing the border, supporting the military, and respecting our veterans. Exactly what we're going to be talking about here on the show in a little bit. Standing for the flag and kneeling before God. By joining AMAC, you are actually taking the first steps to saving the America that you love. AMAC offers an alternative to just about every benefit that other group offers, but without the liberal agenda. I stand with AMAC, and I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter. The benefits of membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Carter. I want to talk a little bit about the border. Border apprehensions have skyrocketed month over month, up 263% since October 2019. You all know this. I have been down at the border almost every week since the beginning of this year, covering the story not only for our podcast here, the Sara Carter Show with Radio America, but also with Sean Hannity on Fox News every single night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And showing you what's happening down there by talking to the Border Patrol agents, talking to the law enforcement officers. And right now, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, more than 164,000 people, I want you to think about the magnitude of that number, were apprehended at the border just last month. Guys, this does not include the gotaways. And I can't even begin to tell you, just last week, while I was in Eagle Pass, Texas, I watched hundreds of people walking around their home. These are people that do not want to be apprehended, people that are not turning themselves in over to Border Patrol. That number is double the number who were apprehended the same month of 2020. That 164,000 that was actually caught, that is double what we saw in 2020. Numbers for the month were slightly higher or lower than September, seeing a 14% decrease. You can see all of this on my website, saracarter.com. Go there and look it up, because it's I think it's something that we need to pay very close attention to. I'm going to be heading back to the border actually in the next few weeks. There are some stories that I want to discuss with you and with others once I get down there. Part of that is the extensive rise in crime on both sides of the border, particularly in the United States, and the national security aspects of what's going to happen if we don't gain control of the chaos down there. And it's really that serious. I reported on that, God rest her soul, but that poor woman that was found dead on our side of the border, who had been mutilated, who had been appeared to have been raped and left there to die after being tortured. Her body was found 7 days later. They believe it was a drug cartel hit. Her purse was alongside her with $2,000 in it, never even taken. That crime has not been caught yet. So I just want you to think about that and think about what's happening there. And I want to talk a little bit about the FBI raid on my friend James O'Keefe. This is a terrible situation. This isn't about James O'Keefe or whether you like James O'Keefe's style of journalism or not. This is about our First Amendment rights. This is about our rights as a nation to report the truth. The government, and especially the administration and President Biden, has no authority to do this. They really don't. They did it, but they shouldn't have. And it scares the daylights out of me because, as you know, for the last 6 or 7 years, we have all been discussing this. I have been discussing this since breaking the stories on the Russia hoax scandal that the FBI conducted against a sitting U.S. president. And I'm wondering to myself, how many more people do we not know about that the FBI is collecting data on and abusing the system? And I'm not talking about the whole FBI, guys. I know there's good people in the FBI. I know we have great agents in the FBI that are doing their job. But there are people in official capacity, those like we saw before, like Andy McCabe, like James Comey, like others at the NSA, like James Clapper, like John Brennan, who was with the CIA, who did not mind weaponizing the systems against U.S. citizens. I think if you talk to Carter Page, you'll understand what I mean. If you talk to Sean Hannity, you'll understand what I mean. If you talk to me or John Solomon, you'll understand what I mean. Dan Bongino, you'll understand what I mean. When Maria Ivanovich was collecting our information. And then not only that, when evidence emerged that Sean Hannity's communications had been intercepted and that the FBI was looking at those as well. And that John Solomon's communications were intercepted. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened right here with Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe. The Biden administration's effort to establish, and this is coming from Politico, itself as a committed champion of press freedom is now facing doubts because of the Justice Department's aggressive legal tactics against a conservative provocateur known for his hidden camera video stings. In a pre-dawn raid, you guys, last weekend, James O'Keefe and other similar raids on his associates were prompting alarms by First Amendment advocates, mainly by me. I was getting even messages from David Schoen. Remember, he was the former defense attorney for President Trump about this. They contend that prosecutors appear to have roughshod over the Justice Department's media procedure policies for protecting journalists, that they're not protecting journalists. And an ensuing federal investigation resulted in the FBI raid on O'Keefe's home in Westchester County, New York. At 6 a.m. last Saturday, they seized all of his cell phones pursuant to a court record. Can you imagine this? O'Keefe said he stood handcuffed in his underwear in a hallway with almost a dozen agents, one carrying a battering ram, searched for his phones. People, this is what happens in Russia. This is what happens in, my friend's calling right now from Pakistan. That's what happens in Pakistan. You know, when the ISI wants to seize your information to see who you've been speaking to. This is unbelievable. You know, this comes after a time where, you know, Biden and Merrick Garland are saying they're going to show respect to the media. No, this is about, that is a lie. I want you to understand that is a lie, because remember, under President Obama's administration, they basically expanded the ability for the DOJ and the FBI to spy on journalists. Not only on journalists, but I'm going to rehash this again. John Solomon and I broke this story years ago. The Obama administration was able to spy on doctors, on lawyers, on clergy. I want you to think about that. They expanded their powers to collect information from some of our most trusted people. What is that? What does that say about the direction our country is taking? So this whole situation, it's not about like the government finding out if O'Keefe is talking to a terrorist that's planning an attack. Okay, that has always been kind of a big no-no. You can't protect somebody from a crime. This whole thing is about finding out if O'Keefe had access and what kind of access he had to the alleged theft of a diary of President Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley. If somebody had actually sent this diary to O'Keefe. The document that made it to O'Keefe's organization, Project Veritas, was never published. It wasn't. I saw, James has talked about this publicly. They never published anything on the subject, and they turned that document over to the police because they weren't even able to verify it. That didn't even matter. The Biden administration wanted to know what and who spoke to O'Keefe. They took away all of his privileged rights as a journalist to do it. They raided his home, handcuffed him in his underwear, left him standing there, had a battering ram, took his cell phones. Now they have access to every single source, every single conversation, everything. Everything. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what could. And especially for journalists, the whole point is to hold the government accountable and to hold government officials accountable and to be a watchdog and to be a voice for the voiceless. A society, a democratic society, a republic cannot survive without an open press and a free press. And we have been slowly losing that. It has been eroding. It is the main reason why now that I've been covering journalism for so long, writing stories, publishing stories, I've become more of a columnist so that I can speak out against certain things that I've seen over my years as a journalist, see what's happening with our government, be able to say it out loud without having to feel like I have to be objective to everything. I'm not objective anymore about certain things because I'm writing as a columnist. But we have to speak out against this. And every single person that believes in democracy, that believes in this nation, needs to find the actions by the FBI and this administration atrocious. These are armed agents that we have entrusted to protect us, not to work against us. These are armed agents. Think about that. Imagine them raiding your home just because the president wants to know who you've been talking to. Let's just call it out. There would be no other reason why they would be in there. That's what they wanted. They wanted to find out who James O'Keefe was talking to, who leaked that diary, which he wasn't able to verify was her diary anyways. So we've really, really got to pay attention to these issues. I stand by James O'Keefe. I stand by what he is doing and fighting the good fight against, this government overreach. And I hope to bring him on our show soon one day. Hopefully he'll be able to do that and talk about this, because I think what has happened here is an atrocious act. And if we don't stop it now, we are going to be on the brink of a change in this nation that we have never seen before. Guys, before I go any further, and we have Daniel Gade coming on, so that's very, very important. I want you to stay tuned, because Daniel is going to lay out what's happening with our veterans. I mean, suicide rates going up. We have issues of addiction. We have a system in the Veterans Administration that really needs to be looked at carefully, maybe be revamped. We want to give our troops, our military, our service members a reason to live, give them a chance to get back into society and do what they do best. I mean, because these are some of the best people in our nation. Look, it's getting cold again, especially here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. It's freezing. And the best way to keep yourself warm this winter is 2 words: heat holders. I'm glad I brought mine with me. Heat holders makes the warmest thermal socks around. They keep your feet warmer than just about any ordinary socks. I can attest to that. I was wearing them last night with my boots here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And it's, in the coldest conditions. How do they do it? Heat Holders uses a 3-stage process with a cashmere-like advanced insulating yarn. So it's really, really soft. It doesn't feel itchy inside your feet. It's really nice. You guys are going to love this. And if you buy it for Christmas for your relatives, they're going to love it. Give someone you love heat holders for the holidays. Go to heatholders.com and enter the code Sara, that's SARA, and save 15% off your order. Receive free shipping with any purchase of $25 or more. Don't freeze your butt or your feet off this winter. Remember to go to heatholders.com and use the code Sara, SARA. That's heatholders.com. Heat Holders, making life warmer. Without any delay, I'd like to bring on retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Gade. He lost his right leg in Iraq in 2005. He was the 2020 Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Virginia. He's the author of Wounding Warriors: How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer. And we've got to pay attention to this. It's not going to be what you all want to hear, but sometimes tough love is the right love. First of all, I want to thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Gade, and I promise I'll call you Daniel, but I want to give credit where credit is due. You're retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. You lost your right leg in Iraq. Thank you so much for your sacrifices, and I'm so grateful to have you on the show to talk about your book, Wounding Warriors: How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer. I don't think there's ever been a better time to lay out this case, especially after Afghanistan, the horrific pullout that we've seen, and also the issues that our veterans have been facing for decades, I believe, in our country, nationally. So thank you again for being a part of the show.
Yeah, Sara, thanks for having me on, and of course for your husband's sacrifice as well.
Thank you. Let's talk about your book, because I'm fascinated. Part of writing a book for me, I'm starting one right now, is kind of a therapy for me as well. You know what I mean? Going through it, trying to see how I've experienced my life over the last few years, either covering the border or covering national issues. This is a very personal book for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. So the roots of this book, Wounding Warriors, which is available at woundingwarriors.com and Amazon and places like that, including audiobook, which is nice. But the roots of this book go back to 2005 when I was wounded, and basically the day after I was wounded, my life had changed completely. Right. So I spent 3 weeks unconscious, and then I woke up and I was missing a leg and I was all messed up. But my wife was awesome.
Tell everyone how that happened in Iraq.
Yeah. I got hit by a roadside bomb. It was the second time I'd been wounded. I'd been wounded by a rocket propelled grenade about 2 months earlier. And then on January 10th, 05, I got hit by a roadside bomb when I was in my Humvee and sort of woke up on my back in the ditch and was evacuated. It was really miraculous. When I went to on a Marine Corps helicopter to a Navy surgical facility, and I'd bled out all the way. And the surgeons went to the mess hall and said, "Hey, if anybody has A positive blood, we need your help right now." And 25 sailors and Marines came over and donated their blood right on the scene, warm straight from their bodies into mine. And that's pretty great.
Wow,
And it
that's
says something
amazing.
about, yeah, it's cool because it says something about service and about sacrifice and no greater love and all those things that we all believe. Um, but the, but so then I go to Walter Reed, and was unconscious for weeks. And when I became conscious, this is really important. When I became conscious, my wife said to me very early on, she said, look, for right now, I'm going to take care of everything. I'll take care of our daughter. I'll take care of our finances. I got everything. I'll take care of it all. But as soon as you're able, it's your job to lead our family and it's your job to provide for us. So, as soon as you can get better, get better. And so that was a powerful, obviously, we know from science and from research, I have a PhD in public policy, but we know from research that men derive their identity from their work primarily.
Right.
Women get their identity from their work and from their relationships, including with children if they have any, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
So for men, that work connection is very powerful, and she reoriented me on that, and that was very helpful to me. But what I observed closely around me and my fellow seriously wounded people was that many of them began to go down this road of dependency, believing that because they were heroes, and many of them are, but because they were heroes, that they deserved everything, and that their discussion became, instead of how can I thrive, their discussion became how much stuff can I get,
Mm-hmm.
and including, by the way, from the government and from nonprofits and from other people and all of that. And so their identities began to shift from powerful, strong, mission focused to something else like dependent. And I saw it, and I didn't have the tools yet to think about it from a policy point of view. And then a year to the day after I got hurt, I was able to start my master's degree, still on active duty. I stayed on active duty after I got blown up for another 12 years. But I started my master's degree, and then I began to acquire those tools. And then I got a call from the White House in spring of '07 saying, hey, can you come do veterans policy for the Bush administration? So I go from this user level knowledge of the system to like a 50,000 foot White House view of the policy issues. And so I had the training and the experience and the position to understand this stuff. And here's what I discovered. The reason why bad policy is making veterans sicker and poorer is because the left and the right are making a terrible mistake when it comes to veterans. The left believes, basically, and I'll say this because I'm not a member of the left, but the left believes that every veteran is a broken toy and therefore deserves everything. The right believes,
100%. Yep.
yeah, 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 and
100%.
the right believes that every veteran is a hero and deserves everything. And the
Right.
problem is, they don't distinguish. The right doesn't do a good job distinguishing between, war criminals and, the Navy SEAL with the Medal of Honor who I met the other day, right? There's no, I mean, President Trump, I think, made some mistakes in this area because he sort of believed that, it doesn't matter if you kill civilians on the battlefield, just by wearing a uniform, you're a hero. And so the two
Correct.
come together and they say, the left says veterans deserve everything, the right says veterans deserve everything. And then there's these interest groups shaking the deserve everything tree for money, right? For federal dollars.
And then you realize
Little,
that the majority of that money never ends up in the hands of any of the veterans or any of the services that they say they're providing. It's a very small amount of that money. It usually lines the pockets of these special interest group
it, yeah,
employees.
it often does. That's true. But the other thing, even the money that ends up in their pockets in the form of particularly disability benefits, and let me stop there just for a tiny second. When you see a disabled veteran license plate on a car,
Hmm.
you're thinking somebody who's blinded or burns or an amputee or a spinal cord injury. Those sort of are the
Right.
four things that you're thinking that person might be. But reality is that the disability system itself has had such bloat over the years that the number one disability that the VA rates for is called tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears, for which there is no test. The number two
Right.
is
For which
regular
my
old.
husband had his whole entire life since
Exactly,
the
exactly.
war,
Yeah, yeah,
since shooting.
and sometimes, well, sure, sometimes it's caused by loud noise, but sometimes it's also caused by aging. And there's
Right.
no test for it, which means all they do is they say, "Hey, do you have tinnitus?" And you just, "Oh yeah, doc, it's bothering me terrible." And if you're willing to lie about it, then you can get the payment for it. Same thing with hearing loss and back pain and knee pain and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is real. Of course it's real and it can be crippling,
Right.
but it's also easily feigned. And the Department of Veterans Affairs does a very poor job of separating the wheat from the chaff. So once those disability benefits are getting into somebody's hands, what it does is, and remember what I said about identity earlier, what it does is it weakens the connection between the veteran and the labor market. And so we know that, actually, a perfect example, last year during COVID, and by the way, COVID's over. I've declared it to be over, canceled.
Thank you.
So no masks for anybody. But we saw this, that when people were paid extra to stay home, they stayed home, and we know that that's been happening.
We still can't even get them to work because I am in a hotel in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as everyone knows. And the poor gal last night was all by herself. She said there was nobody else here to help her. And there was a line of crazed reporters trying to get into a room with 40-degree weather and wind. So, so I totally get it. She was like, nobody wants to come to work. I've talked to so many people where they can't even hire people because even when they have open hiring days, no one shows up for an interview.
Yeah, so we know that's happening due to extra payments. And with veterans, that's been happening. The evidence shows that that's been happening for decades in veterans world. And here's the problem. The real nub of the problem, I don't care about, I do sort of peripherally care about the financial side and are we wasting money as a country? There's a ton of things we waste money on, right?
Right.
But the thing I care about the most is the fact that that money is weakening veterans' connections to the labor market, which means that it is weakening their sense of purpose and value and mission,
right,
and causing them, by the way, to have a sense of despair because they're like, oh gosh, you mean like my whole life is being disabled forever? That's what my life is going to be? I'm just going to sit here and collect checks. And at the same time as that's all happening, we have a veteran suicide crisis, which we all know about, and it's horrifying.
It's horrific.
But remember that it's horrifying, but suicide is a disease of despair, fundamentally. And what we're doing is we have systems that make veterans feel despair. And so the purpose of Wounding Warriors is to shine a light on this. And by the way, of course, a lot of what I'm saying here is kind of edgy. I recognize that. But the reason I'm saying it is because I have a profound love for veterans, and I want veterans to have systems that help them thrive. And for those people who say, "Oh, well, veterans are already well taken care of," well, the suicide rate says otherwise.
Absolutely,
and the homelessness rate says otherwise, and the mental health crisis and the addiction rate, all of it says otherwise. And we can do better. And so the purpose of this book is really to shine a light on a broken system which pays veterans to be sick and then wonders why we have so many sick veterans at the same time.
Daniel, I couldn't agree with you more. I remember when my husband was in the hospital and I really didn't think he was going to make it either. I had spoken to him after he was blown up. He was hit by a grenade, ripped out his right eye, clipped the optical nerve of his left eye, and was maybe about what the doctor said, 1 millimeter from hitting the interior vein in his head that would have had him bleed out on the battlefield, and there would have been nothing they could have done. And so when he did come back, and we weren't sure yet how he had lost his eyesight completely, and he was at the hospital, and he had some, there was that realization after the doctor did tell him, you're never going to see again. And I said to him, you know what? You may not have your eyes, but you have your mind, you have your body, you have the same abilities that you've always had, except for the fact that you're going to have to change things up a little bit. But I'm not going to let you sit in a bed. I'm not going to let you get depressed. You're going to, and I did the same thing as your wife. I'm going to you need to get back to work eventually. We're going to rehab together, and then we're going to find a way together to make this work. And we did that. He rehabbed for it took him about a year. We got a guide dog, Kenny, who I loved so much. And he's now at the big, beautiful heaven in the sky where good guide dogs go, I think. And we have our other guide dog, Danny. But my husband went back to work and provided for our family, had his friends, felt great about himself. Of course, he had to learn to use JAWS, which was a challenge. But he's good at challenges. That's what veterans are good at. For the most part, our soldiers are up to the challenge, right? And they're able to say, okay, this is a new way of living my life. It may not be the same way, but I'm going to do it. And other than ups and downs that any normal couple would go through, we have the best relationship ever because of those challenges and because we've overcome them together. Do you notice that more with couples who have really gone through the similar process, like you and your wife, like me and my husband, or, have you noticed that? Like when they take those challenges on, then just sitting at home and.
I'll talk about my marriage first, just for a second. So, I think for sure that extra pressure and refining have made us, stronger together. But what I've seen in veteran families is basically one of two ways. One is the way that you described, where you and Marty, became closer, and where Wendy and I became closer and stronger together. The other is where those kinds of things drive a marriage apart. The cracks that were already pre-existing are made worse by, if you put a dish in the dishwasher that's already cracked, heats up and it will break.
Right.
The same thing happens in these kinds of situations. But the real one of the things that I think is causing, we know there's actually a divorce crisis in veterans as well. And one of the things that can happen when the veteran, let's say, 85% of veterans are men. So I'm just going to use the male pronouns here. So when a man is home on disability benefits, right? And somebody says to him, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And he says, "I'm a disabled veteran." Well, that's not a verb. That's not what you do. That's a noun. It's what you are, right?
Right.
And so it's not an answer to the question. But if he begins to embrace his sickest self and begins to embrace the dependency and all that stuff that can go with disability, then what happens is, his wife is out. She's going to work every day. She's a school teacher or a nurse
Right.
or a whatever, an executive, she's a reporter at Fox News or whatever she is, she's going out and doing that stuff. She's working. And it can't, I think it must be a pretty strong sense of resentment to see him just kind of being a layabout and sitting on the couch, right?
So true. I never wanted that. That's honestly,
No,
Marty will hear
not.
this. Marty will hear this. That was always a fear of mine because when we met, here's this big, strong guy who's taking charge, who's doing everything, that I always wanted in a man, somebody who's a protector of the family, who brings home money, who is doing a pretty cool job, I think, and I'm just kind of like, I'm there to support him. He's there to support me. And I said, this is about us working together, but it's about who you are as a person, as a man. And I don't want to take that away from you, and I don't want you to take it away from me. So we've got to find a way to make this work. And
you married a lion. You don't want a lamb.
Yeah.
You would have married a lamb.
I would have married a lamb. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you wanted a lamb, you would have married a lamb. And there's plenty of lamb men out there.
I don't want a lamb. Marty still refuses to get a pedicure. He says there's no way in hell anyone's dragging him in there. One's playing.
He'll love this. That's funny. He'll love this story. So after I graduated from Ranger School, I was the honor grad of my Ranger School class. And my feet were all messed up afterwards. My toenails were all scraggly and stuff. And my wife took me in to get a pedicure at this place in Atlanta. And she's like, "How do you feel about this?" And I'm like, at this point, as a brand new airborne ranger or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, at this point, I'm pretty secure in my masculinity. I'm okay with somebody taking care of these nasty feet. So we went and did that. So tell Marty, hey Marty, if you're listening, go get your stinking feet fixed, man. Yeah,
he's gonna be like, "No way, man. No one's playing with my feet." But it's funny though. I think it's just a thing for him. But it was always just the way Marty was, and I appreciated everything about that, and that's why I think you're so right, and that's why this is such an interesting podcast for me. One of the things I was going to ask you: do you feel, and this is something that I, as the wife of a wounded veteran and our children, how we all dealt with it, I really felt that there was this vacuum for families. That the veteran, of course, is the epicenter and is the person that was wounded but the families were kind of just side things to be thought of. It wasn't like the wife and the children, and Marty had a different situation. I always called it the gray space because of the type of the type of veteran that he was when he was wounded. So he was already out of the U.S. military. He was working as a contractor for for the government. And there was a gray space. It was a very classified space. It was a very lonely space. But I always feel that maybe in some cases, it's the families too and the children that are kind of ignored. And I really think it takes a whole, like if you're going to heal the soldier, you need to try to heal the family at the same time.
Yeah.
There needs to be a way for the whole family to kind of operate together. What do you think?
That's exactly right, Sarah. And if you look, there's that list of, and you can download this. It's like a list of like life altering events, and you should be alert to the emotional and mental, stress that's caused by life altering events. And it's like death of a loved one, loss of job, acquisition of a disability, whatever it is. But one of those, of course, is, marital stress, right? Marital breakdown. And so if we care about the veteran, what we ought to be doing is helping veterans thrive in that way,
Right.
and helping those marriages stay healthy and things like that. So paying attention to the spouses and children is very, very important. But it can take a really pretty scary turn. And here's what I mean. The VA has a new program called the Caregiver Program. It's relatively new. And for some people, and we both know some people who have had very serious brain injuries, or they're in a wheelchair or in a bed only. I mean, they're completely broken forever, and it's not going to get better.
Right.
For those people, it makes sense to, if the spouse has to leave his or her job to take care of that veteran, of course, it makes sense to pay them for the fact that they're doing this work, right? The problem is that the VA has continued to expand the caregiver program. So now a lot of spouses of disabled veterans are labeled as their caregivers. But go back to what I was saying earlier about identity. So if the government, by putting a wife, let's say, in charge of her veteran's life and saying, okay, you're the caregiver, what does that do? It puts the husband subordinate to, instead of as a partner, instead of as an equal partner, it puts him subordinate to his wife. And again, with identity, it shifts his identity in a direction of dependency. And I think it probably breeds, and it'd be a very interesting study. Of course, the VA is terrified of studies like this. Like if you question their programs, they get really upset.
So true.
A study on what does that do to the psyche of the veteran himself to have his wife put in charge. And I had a guy reach out to me. I talked about this on a podcast the other day, and I had a guy reach out to me, and he said, "Yeah, what's next? Is the VA going to start issuing gigantic strollers and pacifiers for every veteran?" And I was like, "Ooh, your words, not mine, brother." But
that's how he feels. But that's how he feels, right? But that's how men feel.
Feels.
Men don't want to feel. Not even women, in a way. Look, even if something happened to me, I always told my husband, and he even says it to me, I'm grateful to God it was me and not you, because I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan too, and there were a lot of situations that could have gone sideways, and I could have come home wounded. I would have been like the worst, right? I would have been maybe like that film Helen Keller where she's throwing everything, but I would have been doing that every day. It would have been an everyday occurrence. My husband would have left me. I said,
by the way, I doubt all those things very seriously. You would have thrived through adversity.
Hopefully I would have.
But many people don't.
Hopefully I would have. My husband, on the other hand, was for me, and I think I'm blessed in that sense. I'm going to say a story, and I don't know if I've ever said it on this show, but I remember the therapist when we were in Palo Alto, California, and I was in on this one therapy session. It was before we were getting ready to leave. It was to learn to be, to deal with your blindness, to, walk, to mobility training, basically, at Palo Alto. Mm-hmm. And the therapist said, Marty, I just have one question. He said, you have come to terms with your blindness faster than anyone. And at first I was thinking you were avoiding it, like you were just trying, like you hadn't dealt with it yet. But that's not the case. He said, you've come to terms with it faster than anyone I've ever seen. How did you do that? And my husband, Marty, looked at him and he said, well, Doc, can I do anything to change it? And he said, no. And he said, no. And he said, that's what it is. That's why I've come to terms with it. I'm not going to sit here and say, I wish I would have. I wish I could have. why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? I don't regret anything I did. So I can't change it. So now I just got to move forward. I've got to accept it. And it's tough and it's hard, but I'm moving forward. I think that is a big difference, you know? What do you think it takes? And this is just, you know, we see suicide rates skyrocketing in our veterans communities. We see dependency, you know, a lot of times just by issuing narcotics. I've seen that even friends of ours who were given so much opioid to treat, you know, pain and this and that, they became addicted. And then they had to fight that addiction off or find themselves probably in a hole 6 feet under. What is it going to take for us to change this trajectory in our country of doing this to our veterans?
Yeah. So I had, you know, I've done a couple of podcasts, and I was on Fox News with Pete Hegseth the other day and things like that. And I've had a bunch of people reach out to me. And I thought, actually, because some of what I'm saying is sort of questioning some orthodoxy, and, you know, you really make people upset when you question orthodoxies. But I've had a ton of people reach out to me on LinkedIn and on social media and things like that, and directly to my email. How they got that, I don't know. It's out there. And said, hey, you're exactly right. You know, I don't want to say this publicly because I'm worried about my job, because I'm worried about people critiquing me, because I'm in the VA and I see this every day, and I'm afraid I'll get fired if I talk about it. The purpose, really one of the purposes of Wounding Warriors, is to be the guy who says the truth. And then hopefully people will follow me in saying the truth about what they're observing. You know, I've had members of Congress behind closed doors talk to me about this and say, you know, you're 100% right. I wish we could change it, but the interest groups are too powerful, whatever. But what we all need to do, I think, in the veteran community is it's on us to change this narrative. Because the narrative right now is everybody leaves military service as a broken, hollowed out shell of a person, you know, with mental illness, with depression, with, you know, physical wounds, mental wounds. The favorite buzzword right now is moral injury, you know, like killing bad guys inflicts a moral wound on you. And I'm like, I disagree. Actually, it's something that we should be doing, is killing the enemies of our country. But anyway,
Right.
So everybody leaves military service as a broken toy. That's a false narrative. But veterans ourselves, are the ones who have to fix it. And public policy leaders, like members of Congress, are people who we hire them to serve us. And what they should be doing is telling the doggone truth. The system that we have is not working for veterans. By paying veterans to be sick, you end up with more sick veterans, and those sick veterans feel worthless, and then many of them commit suicide. Now, if just saying that is too hard for you, you don't belong in public policy, because we need to serve our veterans in a way that helps them thrive. And that means reskill, transition, and upskill, help them thrive after service, get them the job training, the college education, the whatever it is that they need to go back to where they were before, even those of us with serious disabilities. I mean, I'm obviously
Right.
super passionate about this.
Let them know they are worthy, that all of their life
Correct.
experience is important, that we need them, that you're not made up of just the parts of your body, but mentally you are capable of doing anything from financial training to going back to getting your master's to going back into the workforce in the government, wherever you want to go. I agree with you wholeheartely on that, Daniel. And is there a happy medium between both getting the veteran back to work and providing the services needed?
Yeah, for sure. So some veterans definitely need services and deserve disability benefits, and we shouldn't be shy about that. But what we ought to be doing is really, and in the epilogue of Wounding Warriors, again, the website woundingwarriors.com, you can read the intro and the prologue and the first chapter, I think, for free, and the reviews by people like Secretary Mattis and a couple of former VA secretaries and people like that. But in the epilogue of the book, I lay out a couple of principles for how we can get out of this morass that we're in. And one of the principles is
Correct.
we need to, first off, we need to change how we talk about disabilities, because not every condition is a disability. Some of them are just conditions, you know? And number two, and I think this is probably most important, actually, is that we need to prioritize job placement and civilian thriving as our main goals. That should be our number one goal. And then only after we've done everything we can to help a veteran thrive and be placed in the labor market should we label whatever residuals are left as disabilities. So instead of disability being first and then employment being an afterthought, we need to make employment and thriving first as our number one goal of all of our public policy. And then disability should be the tail, but the dog is employment and the tail is this disability.
You know
system.
what? I couldn't agree with you more. I think our veterans are worth that. I think the incredible sacrifices made by the men and women in service can never, ever be replaced. And when we care about other people, we should be willing to give back, but give back in the right way, right? Not take away more from them. They've already had so much taken away from them to begin with.
That's right. That's right, Sarah. And so, I really appreciate it. I think it's, you're going to get some pushback on the things I've talked about today. And it's fine. I stand by what we've talked about today. And you and I have unique perspectives that it'd be very difficult for anybody to say about either one of us that we don't care about veterans. That's nonsense. But what we do care about is helping veterans thrive. And that's what the book Wounding Warriors is really about.
Thank you so much. And where can people get Wounding Warriors again? And by the way, I'm going to get it for my husband on Audible. He'll love that. Now that you told me it's on Audible, I can do that. Where else can they get the book?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it. Somebody told me the other day they got a copy at Target, which was blew my mind. But if you want a signed copy, just go to woundingwarriors.com and order it there, and I'll send you a signed copy. But it's also like the Audible book. I actually read it myself because I think that's really important. I like when people do that.
That's fantastic.
So it's read by the author. That's me. So I really appreciate it when people do that, and please leave an Amazon review when you've read it. And it's number one in its category on Amazon right now, and I'd like to sell 100 million copies only because I really want to change the cultural narrative about veterans, because what we're doing right now just isn't working.
Attention, the price of silver has increased 340% since 2000, and it continues trending higher. Universal Coin and Bullion is offering our listeners a special locked-in price of just $30 for a beautiful 1-ounce 2021 American Silver Eagle coin, the most popular coin in the world for collectors and investors. Call Universal Coin like I did, leaders in the precious metals industry, at 1-800-UCB-GOLD to get your beautiful U.S. Mint silver coin for only $30, guys. In fact, the company's president, Dr. Mike Fulgens, is recognized as America's gold expert, and he is the 2021 Coin Dealer of the Year. They also have rare gold coins, but this special silver deal is only available by using the code Sara, S-A-R-A. Call 1-800-UCB-GOLD. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD. I really loved talking to Daniel Gade. He is, has a perspective that I think is necessary. One that I've talked about even with my husband, as you guys know. I also wanted to just quickly, before we wrap it up today, talk about what Governor Ron DeSantis, is doing in Florida. And I think it's pretty amazing. Look, I believe that Governor Ron DeSantis more than likely will be the nominee for president of the United States. I just heard a bunch of cheering behind me, just in my own mind, but that's okay. I really do, because he is really moving to the forefront. He's not afraid to take on the Biden administration, to stand up for what he believes in. We've seen that with how he's handled COVID. And by the way, COVID is surging in the states with the most restrictions and dropping in the states where there is no mandates. No real mandates. And right now, that's what Governor Ron DeSantis is doing. In Florida, he's actually opened his arms and told law enforcement officials who do not want to get the vaccine, it is their choice, right? He's told law enforcement officials, cops, firefighters, even nurses, like, look, if you don't want to get the jab, don't be afraid of losing your job. Come to Florida. How about that? And people are doing it. I think they got like 12 law enforcement officers that have already showed up that have left their jobs in New York City police officers that have moved to Florida, at least a dozen so far. And by going there, they're giving them a legislative gift of $5,000 bonus for all out-of-state cops. So all you cops out there who want to relocate and go to a beautiful state. I love Florida. It was such a toss-up between Texas and Florida. And, Texas, it was just a lot of military friends that we had there and people that we love. So we chose that direction. We also love a lot of people in Florida. I'm not saying we don't, but Florida is an amazing state. $5,000 bonus for all out-of-state cops who relocate to the Sunshine State. In May, DeSantis gave all first responders in the state, listen to this, $1,000 in pandemic bonus. This guy cares. I know Governor Ron DeSantis. I knew him when he was in Congress. He is a good man. His family is fantastic. His wife, I pray for her every day. She's battling breast cancer and she's just amazing. So let's all say a prayer for Ron DeSantis, for his family. Let's thank him for what he is doing for our first responders and for the people of Florida. He's making a difference for everyone and making a difference for our country. So I'm throwing that out there. Hopefully one of these days, I don't know, he's so wanted now. I don't think I can get him on the podcast yet, but I'm going to try to get him on the podcast as well. I want to thank you for being a part of this show. I want to thank you for being a part of my life. It means a lot to me. I am here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I would, for everyone who hears this and hears this all the way through, watch Sean Hannity tonight. Let's pray for Kenosha. Let's pray that there are no riots. Let's pray that people find their way. And let's pray for Kyle Rittenhouse and for everyone involved in this mess. I can't even imagine what's going through his family's mind right now and what is happening here in the state. I've talked to a lot of folks. The one thing is certain. Everyone tells me in this situation, there are no winners. And I think they're right. No matter what happens when that jury comes back, I think this has been a tough lesson for all of us. And let's let our lawmakers know we're not going to put up with this anymore. They got to stop using people as political pawns and speaking up and getting the truth out. I mean, the lies that have been said about Kyle Rittenhouse have only made the situation far worse here in Kenosha. Let's talk about the truth, talk about the facts of the case, the facts as they stand and as the way I see it, regardless of how you feel about the decision of Kyle Rittenhouse to go out there that night and defend those businesses, is that he was defending himself. Thank you again for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. Remember to go to SaraACarter.com. That's SaraACarter.com, where you can get the latest and greatest in all the stories and sign up for our email list. And guys, wherever you get your podcast, please download this podcast. Please leave a review. I love reading your reviews. And thanks again. God bless you and God bless this great nation. Frank Ziller, I am so happy to actually meet you. Tunnel to Towers is an organization, a foundation that I am so proud being a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. So thank you so much. Talk to me about the impact of the foundation and what you've been able to do to date since starting the organization.
Well, never in a million years did we think we'd be doing all the work that we're doing. We just want to make sure that we honored the sacrifice and never forgot what happened on 9/11, not just to Stephen, but all those that perished that day. But you know what? Just 10 years ago, we delivered our first smart home. From there, we realized there's such a great need. These great men and women are coming back with these injuries that they would never have survived before on the battlefield. And they need specially adapted smart homes, and they deserve to have a mortgage-free. And that's what we've been doing ever since. So, to date, we've done over 250 of those mortgage-free homes, whether it's for smart home recipients, Gold Star families, or fallen first responder families that leave young kids behind. And this year alone, we're going to deliver 200 of those mortgage-free homes. So we're very proud of that work. And they're not inexpensive. Each one of them not inexpensive. So we count on the goodness of America to join us.
T2T.org. That's T2T.org. It's only $11 a month. It's up to every single one of us to do our part to help those that were willing to give everything to protect us and our families.